Hi everybody and welcome back. I am a hacker and it's really nice to have you on board. In this video, we'll look at the history of TCP IP. The network that eventually morphed into the thing that we now call the internet began in 1969 and it spun out of this government organization called ARPA, which was the Advanced Research Project Agency. They had an idea to create a computer network that was resilient to certain types of military attacks. And the idea was to have this network that would survive in certain types of war and warlike conditions. So ARPANET sent out this request for proposal, and BBN was the company that won the contract to build what was called the ARPANET. The first connection was in 1969, so that's where we got the idea that the internet began in 1969. The internet that we call it now didn't really begin in 1969, but the ARPANET did. And the ARPANET has a long history that goes through the NSFNet in 1980s after the ARPANET was sort of decommissioned. And a lot of other networks were folded into this thing called the NSFNet. That then turned into what we now call the internet once a lot of other networks were connected into it. First protocol on ARPANET. Initially there was 1822 protocol, which was the very first protocol defining the communication on ARPANET. And it was called the 1822 protocol because of the BBN report 1822, which described how it works. Shortly after that was the thing called Network Control Program. And the network control program consisted of ARPANET host-to-host protocol and the initial connection protocol. Now there is certainly not a direct correlation or analogy here, but if you want to think about it in a particular way, you could say that the ARPANET host-to-host protocol is kind of like UDP, and the initial connection protocol is kind of like TCP. So the host-to-host protocol provided a unidirectional flow controlled and stream between hosts, which sounds a little bit like UDP, and the ICP provided a bidirectional pair of streams between the two hosts. Again, these aren't perfect analogies, but the host-to-host protocol is a little bit like UDP, and the ICP is a little bit like TCP. Now the first router was called an interface message processor, and that was developed by BBN. It was actually a regularized Honeywell computer that had special interface and software built specifically for this by BBN. So the first router wasn't a ground-up built piece of hardware, it was actually an existing piece of hardware that was specially purposed for this particular application. So Honeywell had this computer that they made, and BBN took that and made some special hardware interface and wrote some special software that allowed it to run into this interface message processor, which we call now router, which passed messages over the ARPANET from one location to another. So where did the IP came in here? Well, in 1973, a guy by the name of Vint Cerf and another guy by the name of Robert Kahn took the idea of NCP and what the ARPANET was doing, and they tried to come up with some concepts that would work for the needs that the ARPANET had. So by 1974, they had published a paper that was published by the IEEE, and they proposed some new protocols. They originally proposed a central protocol called TCP. Later on, TCP was broken into TCP and IP to get away from the monolithic concept that TCP was originally built on. So they broke it into more modular protocols, and thus we get the TCP IP. So the question comes, how did we get the version 4 and version 6 of IP? Since that's kind of where we are right now. So how did we get there? Between 1977 and 79, we went through the version 0 to 3, and by the 1979 and 1990s, we started using version 4. And that eventually became the de facto protocol on the internet. In 1983, when NCP was finally shut down because all of the hosts on the ARPANET were using TCP IP. By that point, in 1992, work began on IP next generation. And for a long time, all the specification in the RFCG talked about IPNG. Eventually, IPNG became known as IPv6. You may be wondering where IPv5 went. Well, it was specifically purpose protocol that had to do with streaming and certainly not a widespread thing. Okay, so now let's look at what are the differences between IPv6 and IPv4. Well, IPv6 has 128-bit address, which gives us the ability to have some ridiculously large number of devices that have been their own unique IP. IPv4, by comparison, has only 32-bit address, and as you have probably heard, we are well over on our way to exhaust the number of IP addresses that are available. And we have done a lot of things over the years to conserve address space and reuse address space. And so we continued extending to the point at which we just truly ran out of IPv4 addresses. Another thing about IPv6 is it attempted to fix some of the inherited issues in IPv4. And some of those issues has to do with the security concerns. And there are certainly a number of flaws in IPv4, and when they started working on IPv next generation, or IPv6 as we call it, they tried to address those issues and those concerns, and some of those issues were sorted in IPv6, and it may have not been done perfectly, but it was certainly an attempt to go in the right direction. And IPv6 attempted to fix some of those issues that were inherited with the IP. So that's the history of TCP IP. In the next video, we'll talk about how to install Wireshark and how to use it. And you would say that this video was not necessary, as we have already did other videos on different layers of ISO and network fundamentals. Or the videos were just network related. But I think it's important because we studied a lot of things and they were scattered. They were not in an organized form. So I think by this video we have combined all of the knowledge. If you are interested to watch the other videos, I will link them down in the description. But with this video we have combined everything and we have wrapped up all of the things in one video. So in the next video, we'll look at Wireshark and we'll analyze some packets and stuff like that. All of the link would be in the description to my previous video and stuff like that. So till next time, enjoy hacking, stay cheeky breaky, and peace out.